of Solitude, Michel Montaigne, writing 460 years ago, something like that. Let us leave aside the usual long comparison between the solitary and the active life, and as for that fine statement under which ambition and avarice take cover, that we are not born for our private selves, but for the public, let us boldly appeal to those who are in the midst of the dance. Let them cudgel their conscience and say whether, on the contrary, the titles, the offices, and the hustle and bustle of the world are not sought out to gain private profit from the public. The evil means men use in our day to push themselves show clearly that the end is not worth much. Let us reply to ambition that it is she herself that gives us a taste for solitude. For what does she shun so much as society? What does she seek so much as elbow room? There is opportunity everywhere for doing good or evil. However, if Bias's statement is true that the wicked are in the majority, or what Ecclesiastes says, that not 1 in 1,000 is good, the good are rare. If all their numbers you compile, they'll scarcely match the gates of Thebes, the mouths of Nile. Contagion is very dangerous in the crowd. One must either imitate the vicious or hate them. Both these things are dangerous, to imitate them because they are many, and to hate many of them because they are unlike us. Merchants who go to sea are right to be careful that those who embark on the same ship are not dissolute, blasphemous, or wicked, and to regard such company as unlucky. Wherefore Bias said humorously to those who were undergoing with him the danger of a great tempest and calling on the gods for help, "Be quiet, so they may not realize that you are here with me." And in a more pressing case, Albuquerque, viceroy in the Indies for King Manuel of Portugal, when in great peril of shipwreck at sea, took a young boy upon his shoulders for this purpose alone, that in their common danger the boy's innocence might serve him as a guarantee and recommendation to divine favor, and bring him to safety. It is not that the wise man cannot live anywhere content, yes, and alone in a palace crowd, but if he has the choice, says he will flee even the sight of a throng. He will endure it if need be, but if it is up to him, he will choose solitude. He does not feel sufficiently rid of vices if he must still contend with those of other men. Tyrannus chastised as evil those who were convicted of keeping evil company. There is nothing so unsociable and so sociable as man, the one by his vice, the other by his nature. And Antisthenes does not seem to me to have given a satisfactory answer to the man who reproached him for associating with wicked men, when he said that doctors lived well enough among the sick, for if they improve the health of the sick, they impair their own by contagion, and by the constant sight and treatment of diseases. Now the aim of all solitude, I take it, is the same, to live more at leisure and at one's ease, but people do not always look for the right way. Often they think they have left business, and they have only changed it. There is scarcely less trouble in governing a family than in governing an entire state. Whatever the mind is wrapped up in, it is all wrapped up in it. And domestic occupations are no less importunate for being less important. Furthermore, by getting rid of the court and the marketplace, we do not get rid of the principal worries of our life. Reason and sense remove anxiety, not villas that look out upon the sea. Ambition, avarice, irresolution, fear, and lust do not leave us when we change our country. Behind the horseman sits black care. They often follow us even into the cloisters and the schools of philosophy. Neither deserts, nor rocky caves, nor hair shirts, nor fastings will free us of them. The fatal shaft sticks in her side. Someone said to Socrates that a certain man had grown no better by his travels. I should think not, he said. He took himself along with him. Why should we move to find countries and climates of another kind, what exile leaves himself behind? If a man does not first unburden his soul of the load that weighs upon it, movement will cause it to be crushed still more. As in a ship, the cargo is less cumbersome when it is settled. You do a sick man more harm than good by moving him. You embed the malady by disturbing it, as stakes penetrate deeper and grow firmer when you budge them and shake them. Wherefore it is not enough to have gotten away from the crowd, it is not enough to move. We must get away from the gregarious instincts that are inside us. We must sequester ourselves and repossess ourselves. At last you'll say, I've snapped my chains. A fleeing dog may well have snapped his at great pains, yet dangling from his neck the greater part remains. We take our chains along with us, our freedom is not complete. We still turn our eyes to what we have left behind. Our fancy is full of it. Unless the heart is purged, what must we undergo? What battles and what perils to our fruitless woe? How great the bitter cares of lust that rend apart, with terrors in their train, an agitated heart. What ruin, what disasters follow in the path of pride, lust, and luxury, and sloth and wrath. Our illness grips us by the soul, and the soul cannot escape from itself. The soul is at fault, which never escapes itself. Therefore we must bring it back and withdraw it into itself. That is the real solitude, which may be enjoyed in the midst of cities and the courts of kings, but it is enjoyed more handily alone. Now, since we are undertaking to live alone and to do without company, let us make our contentment depend on ourselves. Let us cut loose from all the ties that bind us to others. Let us win from ourselves the power to live really alone and to live that way at our ease. After Stilpo escaped the burning of his city, in which he had lost wife, children, and property, Demetrius Polioxetes, seeing him perturbed in expression amid the great ruin of his country, asked him if he had not suffered loss. No, he replied, thanks to God, he had lost nothing of his own. The philosopher Antisthenes expressed the same idea humorously, that man should furnish himself with provisions that would float on water and could swim ashore with him from a shipwreck. Certainly a man of understanding has lost nothing if he has himself. When the city of Nola was ruined by the barbarians, Paulinus, the bishop of the city, who had lost everything and had been taken prisoner, prayed God thus, Lord, keep me from feeling this loss, for thou knowest that they have not yet touched nothing of what is mine. The riches that make him rich and the goods that make him good were still entire. That is what it is to choose wisely the treasures that can be secured from harm, and to hide them in a place where no one may go and which can be betrayed only by ourselves. We should have wife, children, goods, and above all health, if we can, but we must not bind ourselves to them so strongly that our happiness depends on them. We must reserve a back shop, all our own, entirely free, in which to establish our real liberty and our principal retreat in solitude. Here ordinary conversation must be between us and ourselves, and so private that no outside association or communication can find a place. Here we must talk and laugh as if without wife, without children, without possessions, without retinue and servants, and so that when the time comes to lose them, it will be nothing new to us to do without them. We have a soul that can be turned upon itself, it can keep itself company, it has the means to attack and the means to defend, the means to receive and the means to give. Let us not fear that in this solitude we shall stagnate in tedious idleness. In solitude be to thyself a throng. Virtue, says Antisthenes, is content with itself, without rules, without words, without deeds. Among our customary actions, there is not one in 1,000 that concerns ourselves. The man you see climbing atop the ruins of that wall, frenzied and beside himself, a mark for so many harquebus shots, and that other, all scarred, pale, and faint with hunger, determined to die rather than open the gates to him. Do you think they are there for their own sake? They are there for the sake of a man whom perhaps they never saw, who is not in the least concerned about their doings, and who at that very moment is plunged in idleness and pleasures. This fellow, all dirty with running nose and eyes, whom you see coming out of his study after midnight, do you think he is seeking among his books how to make himself a better, happier, and wiser man? No such news. He is going to teach posterity the meter of Plautus' verses and the true spelling of a Latin word, or die in the attempt. Who does not willingly exchange health, rest, and life for reputation and glory, the most useless, worthless, and false coin that is current among us? Our own death does not frighten us enough. Let us burden ourselves also with that of our wives, our children, and our servants. Our own affairs don't give us enough trouble. Let us also torment ourselves and get headaches over those of our neighbors and friends. What shall a man establish in his soul, or prize anything dearer than himself in his own eyes? Solitude seems to me more appropriate and reasonable for those who have given to the world their most active and flourishing years, following the example of Thales. We have lived enough for others. Let us live at least this remaining bit of life for ourselves. Let us bring back our thoughts and plans to ourselves and our well-being. It is no small matter to arrange our retirement securely. It keeps us busy enough without mixing other undertakings with it. Since God gives us leisure to make arrangements for moving out, let us make them. Let us pack our bags. Let us take an early leave of the company. Let us break free from the violent clutches that engage us elsewhere and draw us away from ourselves. We must untie these bonds that are so powerful, and henceforth love this and that, but be wedded only to ourselves. That is to say, let the other things be ours, but not joined and glued to us so strongly that they cannot be detached without tearing off our skin and some part of our flesh as well. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. It is time to untie ourselves from society, since we can contribute nothing to it, and he who cannot lend, let him keep from borrowing. Our powers are failing us. Let us withdraw them and concentrate them on ourselves. He who can turn the offices of friendship and fellowship around and fuse them into himself, let him do so. In this decline, which makes him useless, burdensome, and troublesome to others, let him keep from being troublesome to himself and burdensome and useless. Let him indulge and care for himself, and especially govern himself, respecting and fearing his reason and his conscience, so that he cannot make a false step in their presence without shame, for it is rare for anyone to respect himself enough. Socrates says that the young should get instruction, that grown men should practice doing good, and that old men should withdraw from all civil and military occupations and live at their own discretion without being tied down to any fixed office. There are some temperaments more suited to these precepts for retirement than others, those whose susceptibility is weak and lax, and whose affection and will are fastidious and slower to enter service or employment, of whom I am one, both by natural disposition and by conviction, will comply with this advice better than will the active and busy souls who embrace everything and engage themselves everywhere, who grow passionate about all things, who offer, present, and give themselves on all occasions. We should use these accidental and external conveniences so far as they are agreeable to us, but without making them our mainstay. They are not neither reason nor nature. They are not. Neither reason nor nature will have it so. Why should we, contrary to their laws, enslave our contentment to the power of others? Moreover, to anticipate the accidents of fortune, to deprive ourselves of the commodities that are in our hands, as many have done through piety and some philosophers through reason, to wait on ourselves, to sleep on the hard ground, to put out our eyes, to throw our riches into the river, to seek pain, some in order to win bliss in another life by torment in this, others to make themselves safe from a new fall by setting on the lowest step. These are the acts of an excessive virtue. Let the sturdier and stronger natures make even their hiding place glorious and exemplary. When riches fail, I praise the safe and simple life, content with humble ways. But then, when better, richer fortune smiles on me, I say that only they live well and sensibly, whose wealth in country manners glistens brilliantly. I have enough on my hands without going that far. It is enough for me, while under fortune's favor, to prepare for its disfavor, and while I am well off, to picture the evil that is to come as far as my imagination can reach, just as we accustom ourselves to jousts and tournaments, and imitate war in the midst of peace. I do not consider the philosopher Arcesilaus less virtuous, because I know that he used gold and silver vessels as much as his fortune allowed him to, and I esteem him more highly for having used them moderately and liberally than if he had given them up. I see to what limits natural necessity goes, and without thinking about the poor beggar at my door, often merrier and healthier than myself. I see to what limits natural necessity goes, and thinking about the poor beggar at my door, often merrier and healthier than myself, I put myself in his place. I try to fit my mind to his bias, and running over the other examples in the same way, though I may think that death, poverty, contempt, and disease are at my heels, I easily resolve not to take fright at what a lesser man than I accepts with such patience. I cannot believe that meanness of understanding can do more than vigor, or that the effects of reason cannot match the effects of habit. In knowing how precarious these incidental comforts are, I do not fail, while in full enjoyment of them, to make it my sovereign request of God that he make me content with myself and the good things I bring forth. I see hardy young men who never fail to carry in their baggage a mass of pills to take when afflicted with a cold, which they fear the less because they think they have the remedy at hand. Thus we must do, and further, if we feel ourselves subject to some graver malady, we must provide ourselves with the drugs that benumb and put it to sleep the affected part. The occupation we must choose for such a life must be neither laborious nor annoying, otherwise there would be no point in having come to it in search of rest. This depends on each man's particular taste. Mine is not at all adaptable to household management. Those who like it should apply themselves to it with moderation. Try to bend things to them, not them to things. Besides, the care of an estate is a job for slaves, as Solus calls it. Some parts of it are most excusable, like the care of gardens, which Xenophon attributes to Cyrus, and a mean may be found between that base and sordid concern, tense and full of anxiety, which is seen in men who plunge themselves deep into it, and that profound and extreme negligence, letting everything go to seed, which we see in others. Democritus's herds devour, his seasons yield, while his swift soul without his body roams afield. But let us hear the counsel of the younger Pliny gives a friend Cornelius Rufus on the matter of solitude. I advise you in this full and prosperous retreat of yours to leave to your servants the sordid and abject care of the household, and to devote yourself to the study of letters, in order to derive from them something that is all your own. He means reputation, being of a like temper with Cicero, who says he uh, who says he wants to use his solitude and rest from public affairs to gain by his writings immortal life. Is knowledge naught to you unless another knows that you know all you do? It seems reasonable when a man talks of retiring from the world that he should set his gaze outside of it. These men do so only halfway. They indeed arrange their affairs for the time when they will no longer be there, but by a ridiculous contradiction they still aspire to reap the fruit of their plan from the world when they have left it. The idea of those who seek solitude for religious reasons, filling their hearts with the certainty of divine promises for the other life, is much more sane and consistent. They set before their eyes God, an object infinite both in goodness and in power. In him the soul has the wherewithal to satisfy its desires abundantly in complete freedom. Afflictions, sufferings come to them as profit, being used for the acquisition of eternal health and rejoicing. Death is to be desired, being the passage to so perfect a state. The harshness of their rules is promptly smoothed by habit, and the carnal appetites are frustrated and then put to sleep by denial, for nothing keeps them up but use and exercise. Only this one goal of another life, happily immortal, rightly deserves that we abandon the comforts and pleasures of this life of ours. And he who can really and constantly kindle his soul with the flame of that living faith and hope builds himself in solitude a life that is voluptuous and delightful beyond any other kind of life. Therefore I am satisfied with neither the purpose nor the means of Pliny's advice. We still would merely fall out of an ague into a burning fever. This occupation with books is as laborious as any other, and as much an enemy to health, which should be our chief consideration, and we must not let ourselves be lulled to sleep by the pleasure we take in it. It is the same pleasure that ruins the frugal man, the miser, the voluptuous man, and the ambitious man. The sages teach us often enough to beware of the treachery of our appetites, and to distinguish true and entire pleasures from pleasures that are mixed and streaked with the preponderance of pain. For most pleasures, they say, caress and embrace us only to strangle us, like those thieves that the Egyptians called Philistas. If we got our headache before getting drunk, we should take care not to drink too much. But pleasure, to deceive us, walks ahead and hides her sequel from us. Books are pleasant, but if by associating with them we end by losing gaiety and health, the best parts of us, let us leave them. I am one of those who think that their benefits cannot counterbalance this loss. As men who have long felt weakened by some indisposition at last give themselves up to the mercy of medicine and have certain rules of living prescribed for them by art, rules which are nevermore to be transgressed, so he who retires annoyed and disgusted with the common way of life must model his new life on the rules of reason, order it and arrange it by premeditation and reflection. He must have taken leave of every kind of labor, whatever aspect it may bear. He must flee in general the passions that prevent tranquility of body and soul, and choose the way that suits his humor best. Let each one know the way that he should go. In household management and study and hunting and all other pursuits we should take part up to the utmost limits of pleasure, but beware of engaging ourselves further where it begins to be mingled with pain. We must reserve only so much business and occupation as we need to keep us in trim and protect ourselves from the inconveniences that the other extreme, slackish, sluggish idleness brings in its train. There are sterile and thorny sciences, for the most part created for the busy life. We must leave them to those who are in the service of the world. For myself, I like only pleasant and easy books which entertain me, or those that console me and counsel me to regulate my life and my death. To saunter silent through the wholesome wood, bent on thoughts worthy of the wise and good, Wiser men, having a strong and vigorous soul, can make for themselves a holy spiritual repose. But I, who have a commonplace soul, must help support myself by bodily comforts, and since age has lately robbed me of those that were more to my fancy, I train and sharpen my appetite for those that remain and are more suitable to this present season. We must hold on tooth and nail to our enjoyment of the pleasures of life, which our years tear one after the other from our hands. Let us seize pleasures, life is ours to claim. Too soon we shall be ashes, ghosts, a name. Now, as for glory, the goal of that Pliny and Cicero set up for us, it is very far from my reckoning. The humor most directly opposite to retirement is ambition. Glory and repose are things that cannot lodge in the same dwelling. As far as I can see, these men have only their arms and legs outside the crowd. Their souls, their intentions are more than ever in the thick of it. Old man, do you cull scraps for others' ears? They have only stepped back to make a better jump, to get a stronger impetus wherewith to plunge deeper into the crowd. Do you want to see how they shoot a grain's length too short? Let us put into the scales the advice of two philosophers, Epicurus and Seneca, of two very different sects, one writing to Idomeneus, the other to Lucilius, their friends, to persuade them to give up handling affairs and withdraw from their high positions into solitude. You have, they say, lived until now swimming and floating, come away and die in port. You have given the rest of your life to light, give this part to the shade. It is impossible to abandon occupations if you do not abandon the fruits of them. Therefore, rid yourselves of all care for reputation and glory. There is danger that the gleam of your past actions may give you only too much light and follow you right into your lair. Abandon with the other pleasures that which comes from the approbation of others, and as for your knowledge and ability, don't worry, it will not lose its effect if it makes you yourself a better man. Remember the man who, when asked why he took so much pains in an art which could come to the knowledge of so few people, replied, "Few are enough for me, one is enough for me, none at all is enough for me." He spoke truly. You and one companion are an adequate theater for each other, or you for yourself. Let the people be one to you, and let one be a whole people to you. It is a base ambition to want to derive glory from our idleness and our concealment. We must do like the animals that rub out their tracks at the entrance to their lairs. Seek no longer that the world should speak of you, but how you should speak to yourself. Retire into yourself, but first prepare to receive yourself there. It would be madness to trust in yourself if you do not know how to govern yourself. There are ways to fail in solitude as well as in company, until you have made yourself such that you dare not trip up in your own presence, and until you feel both shame and respect for yourself. Let true ideals be kept before your mind. Keep ever in your mind Cato, Phocion, and Aristides, in whose presence even fools would hide their faults. Make them controllers of all your intentions. If these intentions get off the track, your reverence for those men will set them right again. They will keep you in a fair way to be content with yourself, to borrow nothing except from yourself, to rest your mind and fix it on definite and limited thoughts in which it may take pleasure, and after understanding the true blessings which we enjoy insofar as we understand them, to rest content with them without any desire to prolong life and reputation. That is the counsel of true and natural philosophy, not of an ostentatious and talky philosophy like that of Pliny and Cicero. How our mind hinders itself. It is it is an amusing conception to imagine a mind exactly balanced between two equal desires, for it is indubitable that it will never decide, since inclination and choice imply inequality in value, and if we were placed between the bottle and the ham with an equal appetite for drinking and for eating, there would doubtless be no solution but to die of thirst and of hunger. To provide against this difficulty, the Stoics, when they are asked whence comes the choice of in our soul between two indifferent things,